Chapter 26 Roll Call. Indall was astounded to hear that Maya had not only left Hawk's Nest, but that she was 10 miles away with Nick Freestone. When Hilltop told him about their disguise, Indall laughed. That's a high price to pay for leaving Hawk's Nest. She's always been vain about her hair. Hilltop did not tell him about Bukong's interest in his sister. He felt it would be a distraction and he needed his great grandson's full attention right now. Indall had already heard about the explosion at the airfield, but he had no idea that Mogwai was responsible. He told Hilltop that the mahouts from the plantation had been sent back to Hawk's Nest as soon as they arrived at the camp. They didn't even unload the elephants from the train, just put the engine into reverse and backed up all the way to Moulmein. We needed the help here, but we were happy that they got to go back home to their families. Bukong was on that train, Hilltop said. Indall frowned. I hadn't heard. There are many mahouts that would like to get their hands on him, including me. Why is he here? Hilltop told him. Bukong's punishment may be short-lived, Indall said in disgust. Why? The rumor is that Colonel Nagayoshi is getting the boot and Major Riku is taking his place. I wouldn't be surprised if Bukong is over there right now packing Riku's belongings for the move to Hawk's Nest. Big and little power, Hilltop thought again. Who had it and how much and how long would it last? He looked at his great-grandson. Indall had lost some weight, but looked as fit as ever. How are you treated here? He asked. It was bad at first, but they've eased up. The Japanese need mahouts, but it's not the same over there. He nodded toward the prisoner of war camp. From where they sat, they could see two of the guard towers and the top of the barbed wire fence. Have you had a chance to talk with Jackson? A few times, but it's difficult. They keep the mahouts and POWs separate. Whenever I get a chance, I volunteer Miss Pretty for rail duty. Jackson is usually assigned to that crew. It's terrible work because you're exposed to the sun all day, but the last two times I volunteered, he wasn't there. He's been sick, Hilltop said. I didn't know, Indall said. It's been bad lately. We've lost two mahouts to malaria in the past 2 months. Do you know what is wrong with him? Hilltop shook his head. If we could find out, I might be able to get medicine to him. There isn't a lot of it around here, but I'm friendly with a couple of orderlies. They can get it from the infirmary if the price is right. I have something a little more permanent in mind. The medicine, Hilltop said. Such as? Escape, Hilltop answered. For both of you. Now that Maya is safe, I can leave whenever I want, Indall said. It's a simple matter of walking away from Miss Pretty while we're working in the forest. If I leave first thing in the morning, I'll have an 8 or 9 hour start before they know I'm gone. The soldiers will search, but if I leave Miss Pretty behind, they won't care if they find me or not. They are more interested in the elephant than the mahout. Indall looked out the window, staring at the guard towers for a few moments, and said, Getting Jackson out is a different situation. Come, I'll show you. Indall and Hilltop stood outside the POW camp, watching through the barbed wire as the sun began to scorch the day. The prisoners were lined up in the main yard, surrounded by dozens of soldiers. A Japanese officer stood on a small platform in front of them, flanked by 4 other soldiers holding clipboards and pencils. Hilltop scanned the faces of the prisoners, but did not see Jackson, and he wasn't certain if he would recognize him if he had. The men were gaunt, worn down by work, heat, lack of food, and disease. It was hard to believe that any of them would survive the day. They're taking roll call, Indall explained. It takes at least an hour. We've caught the end of it. No one is allowed outside the camp until everyone is accounted for. When they finish work, they are marched back into the yard, and no one is allowed into the barracks until the evening roll call is complete. He pointed to the soldiers around them. Most of the guards are Korean. Each man knows the faces of each group of his group of prisoners. No chance of fooling them with a substitution or some other trick. If someone escapes, the guard responsible is executed. It happened at Camp 1. An Australian slipped away. They caught him the next day and executed him and the guard together. Hilltop watched the proceeding carefully as he listened to Endaw's explanation. Prisoner 659, the officer shouted from the platform. A man stepped forward and bowed. Prisoner 683, deceased, a British officer replied. The man on the platform looked to the soldier to his right. He consulted his clipboard and verified that prisoner 683 had died during the night. The roll call continued. 5 more present, 2 more dead, 3 in the hospital. Standing on the porch of the headquarters building next to Major Riku was the man Hilltop hoped he would never see again, Captain Moto. Indaw noticed Hilltop staring at him. Moto, Indaw said, Major Riku's lapdog. Dangerous. I've seen enough, Hilltop said, turning away and walking back to the Mahoots' camp. When they got to the house, Indaw poured him another cup of tea and offered him a bowl of cold rice. Even if we managed to get Jackson out of the camp, we wouldn't get far on foot, Indaw said. We have Hannibal, Hilltop said. Really? Indaw said in surprise. And how is the old rogue? Fine, if you stay away from his feet. He's been no trouble at all. Captain Moto has very good trackers, Indaw said. 2 hill tribesmen. I saw them yesterday, Hilltop said. But they won't be looking for us on Elephant Back. No one knows that I have Hannibal, and he's big enough to carry all of us. There will be no tracks but his. The trackers will mistake him for a wild elephant. Indaw thought about it for a moment, but still didn't like their chances. The best thing we can do for Jackson is to get him medicine and get his son out of Burma safely. Nick Freestone would not agree, Hilltop said. He's not the boy you met a few months ago. He's not going to take your word or mine about his father's situation here. He'll want to see for himself. He's a Freestone. I can't force him to go with me. You mean us, Indaw said. You're coming? Now that Maya is away from Hawk's Nest, I'm not staying here. Where are you taking them? A monastery in Umfeng. I'll try to get them to India from there, but if I can't, the monks will keep them safe until the war is over. Then bring them here, Indaw said. Tomorrow will be perfect. We're having an open market. We have them once a month. People come from all over selling food and supplies. No one's going to notice an old monk and his novices, and the soldiers won't cause any problems. They look forward to the market as much as, if not more, than we do. It's the only place they can get cigarettes, sweets, and other luxuries. We're 10 miles closer to Mfeng from here. I know the perfect spot for Hannibal. A lot of tamarind for him to eat. You can leave him there and bring Maya and Nick into camp tomorrow evening. I'm worried about Captain Moto, Hilltop explained, their encounter with him at the village. You're right to be worried about him, Indaw said, but he rarely comes to the Mahout camp, and I've never seen him in the market. I hear he's nervous around elephants. You're certain it's safe? Nothing is safe with the Japanese, but it will be safe enough. He drew a map on a scrap of paper of where Hilltop was to take Hannibal. Hilltop put it in his bag. Then I'll leave now. Perhaps you should rest first. It's better if I get back to the children. I'll rest when I get there. Indaw gave his great-grandfather a deep bow. I'll try to find out more about how Jackson's doing so I can tell Nick. He smiled. Just tell Maya when she sees me. She has to act like a humble novice, not my little sister. Chapter 27, The Graveyard. Nick and Maya were relieved to see Hilltop and a little alarmed at his condition when he arrived late in the afternoon. He had obviously walked a long way and was exhausted. They sat him down in the shade and gave him water and some food from the bag Keeley had given them. They had spent the entire day worrying and had so many questions they could hardly contain themselves, but they let him eat before they started in. Did you see Indaw? Yes, he's lost some weight, but he's the same old Indaw. You'll see him yourself tomorrow. He's escaped? No, we're going to the Mahout camp. What about my father? Nick asked. I didn't see him, Hilltop answered, but Indaw is going to try to find out how he's doing today. I'm sure he'll be able to tell us something tomorrow. But he's alive? Nick said. Hilltop thought about the officer calling names from the platform and the grim reply, deceased. As far as we know, he said. Nick didn't like the sound of this. Before they could ask any more questions, Hilltop lay down on his mat. We'll have plenty of time to talk tonight, he said wearily. Don't worry if I sleep past sunset. The camp's not far on Elephant Back, and we can't go there until tomorrow evening. He closed his eyes and sensed the children staring at him for a long time before they gave up and quietly walked away. Nick and Maya thought Hilltop would never wake up. It was an uneasy day for them. Maya was ecstatic at the prospect of being reunited with Indal and overjoyed that he was well, but she could hardly share her happiness with Nick. His father's fate was far from clear. She tried to cheer him up by telling him about how clever Hilltop and Indal were and how strong his father was, but it did little to lighten his worry, nor did the conversation they had with Hilltop when they were finally underway. I think it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to get your father out of the camp, he said. But we'll try, Nick said. We'll see. There is more at stake here than your father. We have to consider what failure might mean. If we try and get caught, it's likely that all of us will be executed, or at the very least, imprisoned. I don't think your father would want that to happen, do you? No, sir, Nick answered quietly. Here's another question to think about, Hilltop continued. If it had been possible for your father to escape, don't you think he would have by now? This was not as easy to answer as the first question. I'm not sure, Nick said. He doesn't really know that I'm still in Burma. If he thought I was in danger at Hawk's Nest, I think he would try to save me no matter what the consequences. Hilltop gave him a smile. I think you're right. They reached the first camp an hour before dawn. It was darker than the previous night, but light enough to see the skeleton shapes of the buildings and towers. No one spoke. The camp was laid out like the plans Nick had studied in the vault, but the precise drawings had missed the oppressive hopelessness of the place. As bad as it had been at times, he realized he was lucky to have been in Hawk's Nest all these months. From the drawings, Nick knew they were heading toward the graveyard long before they reached it. So many, Maya whispered when they saw the crosses. And one of them could be my father, Nick thought, listening to the dog tags rattling in the breeze. They were relieved when they reached the tracks. Even Hannibal seemed to relax as they left the camp behind. They arrived at the spot Indal had chosen for Hannibal just after sunrise. He was right about the tamarinds. There were so many pods lying on the ground that there was no need for Nick and Maya to pick any, which was just as well. They were too tired to climb trees. They ate a few handfuls of rice with a bit of meat, then found some shade to sleep in. 2 hours later, Nick awoke with a start and sat up. He wasn't sure if he had heard something or had a bad dream. He scanned the jungle and listened. Nothing seemed amiss. Hannibal was sleeping under a stand of trees about 30 yards away, his belly swollen with pods. If something was wrong, he'd be on his feet. This was why Hilltop didn't worry about somebody coming upon them while they slept. An elephant is the best sentinel on earth, he had told him. It must have been a dream then, Nick thought, trying to remember what it had been about. Maya was lying 10 feet away, and Hilltop another 10 feet beyond her, both of them sleeping soundly. Nick realized that he was incredibly thirsty. Maybe that's what woke him up, he thought. He walked over to the water jug and nearly emptied it. When he stooped to put it back down, he saw the scrap of paper Indal had used to draw the map for Hilltop. He picked it up. There was a stream about midway between where they were and the camp. 2 miles at the most, he estimated. It wouldn't hurt to refill the jug. He could be back before Hilltop and Maya woke up. He started off. This was the first time he had walked alone outside in nearly a year, and it felt a little strange not to have someone with him. The forest was relatively open, but with no road or trails. He wasn't really worried about running into any soldiers this far from the camp. He was worried about getting lost, though. Every once in a while, he marked a tree with the sergeant major's pocket knife so he would be able to find his way back. Wouldn't do to get lost in the jungle this close to seeing father, he thought. It was then that he remembered his dream, which stopped him in his tracks. His heart beat quicker and his mouth went dry again. He had been dreaming about the camp graveyard, but this one was different from the one they had gone through the night before. The bamboo crosses seemed to stretch for miles. There were grave diggers wielding shovels and picks, scooping out holes for the dead, which were piled at the edge of the yard. They picked up a body from the pile and tossed it into a hole like a sack of oats. And this is what made Nick's heart pound in his chest and his mouth go dry. The man in the grave was his father. Nick continued down to the stream, but when he got there, he didn't stop to get water. He crossed it. He knew he was being stupid, but he couldn't seem to make his legs stop until he reached the edge of the clearing where the POW camp had been hacked out of the jungle. He stood in the shadow of the trees, out of breath, covered in sweat, staring at the barbed wire 30 feet away. He could see the guards and the towers clearly. They were more worried about people breaking out of the camp than into it, so their attention was not directed at the jungle. The camp was virtually empty, the prisoners out working in the jungle, but not all of them. The long bamboo barracks on the right side had a red cross painted on the thatched roof. This was to stop enemy fighters from strafing the camp, killing their own sick and wounded. He saw movement through the open windows and wondered if one of the shadows was his father, but it couldn't be. This wasn't why he had risked everything by coming down here. His father was in the graveyard. He slowly worked his way through the jungle fringe, stopping often to glance at the camp to make certain he wasn't being observed. But every time he looked, the soldiers on the other side of the barbed wire were completely at ease, talking with each other, laughing, smoking as if they didn't have a care in the world. The relaxed atmosphere was no doubt very different when the prisoners were back in camp. The cemetery was smaller than the graveyard at Camp 1, 60 or 70 bamboo crosses, some with dog tags hanging from them, others with a name scrawled on a wood plank tacked beneath the cross. He would have to get closer if he wanted to read the names, but that would mean stepping out into the open if a guard happened to look his way. He heard the rattle of a teak gate swinging open and scooted farther back into the forest. Voices, the squeak of wheels. He climbed a tree for a better view. 3 prisoners pulling a heavy oxen cart with a corpse in the back. A single Japanese guard followed behind. Burial duty. Nick watched their slow approach and nearly fell out of the tree with relief and joy when he saw that one of the men pulling the cart was his father. His father was thin and had let his beard grow out, but there was no mistaking the freestone eyes, alert, darting around like a bird of prey. Of the 3 prisoners, he was clearly the healthiest. One of the men had a bandage around his leg and a severe limp. The other had a terrible oozing sore on his face. They stopped the cart and pulled out picks and shovels. His father started swinging the pick as soon as it was in his hand. The other 2 prisoners watched him work. Bury deep. Animals might dig up. Not respectful to dead. Nick had been so fixated on his father, he hadn't paid any attention to the guard. It was Sergeant Sonji. Speedo, make quick, work here. Hot sun, not good for health. Sonji appeared to find the burial duty even more distasteful than the prisoners did. He sat down on a log and wiped the sweat off his face with a handkerchief. He, too, had lost weight in the few days he had been in camp. His father rested while the other 2 shoveled out the dirt he had broken up. He was breathing hard with his hands on his knees, obviously not in as good shape as it first appeared. When they finally finished the hole, Sonji leaned his rifle against the cart and helped them lift the body. Nick doubted any guard would assist like this. Unlike in his dream, they carried the man gently, tenderly laying him in the grave. Sonji removed his hat and bowed his head while Nick's father said a prayer. When he finished, they shoveled the dirt over the top of him. Don't tell, Sonji said. He picked up a shovel and helped them. Nick stayed up in the tree for several minutes after they left. A warm breeze blew across the graveyard. He thought of a haiku. On the way back, Nick got lost. He found the place where he had first seen the camp, but after this, nothing looked familiar. In his hurry, he hadn't stopped to use the sergeant major's pocket knife on this side of the stream. It was getting late. Hilltop and Maya would soon be awake, if they weren't already, wondering where he was. He began to think that he should just stay put, wait for dark, and make his way to the Mahout camp. To find it, all he had to do was follow the perimeter of his father's camp. Hilltop and Maya were sure to show up there, even if they couldn't find him. He turned around to head back to the camp. Are you lost? Nick jumped and swore. Kayale stepped out from behind a tree, a gleeful smile on his face. You scared me half to death. Kayale bowed. My apologies. What are you doing here? I thought you said it wasn't safe for you to come to the camp anymore. It isn't, he answered, but I've been instructed to keep an eye on you. Why? By who? Was that your father in the graveyard? Yes, but you still haven't answered my questions. Follow me, I'll put you in the right direction to Hilltop and Maya. Kayale started off in the opposite direction Nick thought he should go. He caught up to him. Who told you to keep an eye on us? I can't tell you that, Kayale answered, but when I told them you were alive, they became very excited and asked that I make certain you stay out of trouble. You promised that you wouldn't tell anyone about us, Nick said. Kayale shrugged. I meant Japanese. The people I told are happy you are free. Who are they? Nick asked again. Kayale answered the question with his own question. You didn't heed my warning about the camp. Why are you here? I can't tell you that, Nick answered, parroting Kayale's answer. Kayale laughed. Then tell me this. It's been rumored that your father has a large cache of arms hidden in the plantation. Do you happen to know where they are? So that's what this is about, Nick thought. Kayale wants my father's weapons, to sell them, no doubt. I don't know what you're talking about, he answered. My father is a plantation owner. Was a plantation owner, Kayale corrected. Now he is a prisoner of war. Not for long, Nick thought hopefully. They reached the stream and waded across. Kayale had led him to the last tree Nick had marked. You should be able to find your way from here, he said. You're not coming? Kayale shook his head. I have to go. I have some people to meet. That's exactly what you said the last time I saw you, Nick pointed out. Different people, Kayale said. He started back the way that they had come, then stopped and turned. I don't suppose there is any way I can convince you to leave this area. Nick shook his head. Not a chance. Where have you been? Maya asked angrily. Nick held up the water jug. I went down to the stream to get water. What stream? Nick pointed vaguely behind him. He wanted to shout, My father is alive! But he wasn't ready to admit how foolish he had been. He would just make her more angry. Hilltop, on the other hand, didn't appear to be upset by Nick's absence in the least. He was sitting against a tree, watching with bemused expression. Sorry, I lost my place. I saw Kayale. He's still following us? Maya asked. I thought he said it was too dangerous for him to go near the camp. What's that scoundrel up to? Hilltop asked. I'm not sure. Nick told them about their conversation, most of it anyway. Who told him to keep an eye on you? Maya asked. He wouldn't tell me. I don't trust him, Maya said. Neither do I, Nick said. Where did he go? Maya asked. He said he had some people to meet. Again? Nick shrugged and handed the water jug to Hilltop. Okay, look for your next chapters tomorrow.